Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the COVID-19 Relief and Recovery Committee meeting of the 7th of July 2020. If you're joining us via our live stream on YouTube, we welcome you and thank you for joining us. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we meet on the lands of the traditional owners, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. Item 2, apologies, members on leave of absence. We have all members accounted for. Item 3, public question time and receiving of public statements. I understand that we haven't received any questions in advance, and just to let you know that we don't have any members of the public here in the public gallery today. B, response to previous public questions taken on notice. Just to draw attention to any questions that are taken on notice are contained in the agenda, but I believe there were nil last week, so we don't have any of those in this week's agenda. Declarations of interest. I'll just check whether we have received any for this meeting. We have nil. And applications for leave of absence. There are nil. So we'll move to item 6, confirmation of minutes. This is the minutes for the COVID-19 Relief and Recovery Committee meeting of the 30th of June 2020. Could I have a mover and seconder, please? Move Councillor Castle, seconded Councillor Gontaszewski. All those in favour? I declare the minutes adopted. So we move to business arising, and we do have 2 items of business on this week's agenda. The first is our standing item 7.1 COVID-19 weekly update. If I could have a mover and seconder, please. Move Councillor Gontaszewski, seconded Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. I didn't have any significant questions in relation to this item. I just wondered if I would be able to just get an indication in relation to Beatty Park in terms of the current operations of that facility and the exemption and the, I guess, assessment in relation to capacity currently and potential during the subsequent phase of the rollout.
Through you, Mayor Cole, during phase 3, there was an exemption that was applied for, and that was when the venue had a 300-person limit. So when phase 4 came into effect, that 300-person limit no longer applied. So the exemption really has no relevance to phase 4. They can have as many people as they like within the facility, so long as they meet the 1 person per 2 square metre rule.
And through you, Mayor Cole, just to mention in terms of Beatty Park activities, we're slowly coming back online. It's really exciting to see our community members coming through. We had 2,200 people come through the doors yesterday, and we currently have 3,000 members active. So we're slowly coming back into a more normal stream. We're increasing our weekend hours this week, and we're also recommencing our swim lessons and creche this week. So yeah, it's a very optimistic outlook at the moment.
And just in terms of staffing, where are things at in terms of staffing and casual staff that may have had to reduce hours or go to 0 hours during the, I guess, lockdown phases of the pandemic?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole, we definitely are bringing our casuals back online. I'm aware that in the last couple of weeks, we've had a couple of large tranches who've gone back through training and induction. They need to do that to comply with our new requirements in terms of being COVID safe. And so as soon as we can get people back online, we are. And yeah, I'm aware that quite a few people have now recommenced work. I don't know the specific numbers.
Nothing further from me.
Councillor Castle. Thank you, Mayor Cole. I was pleased to see the update on homelessness situation and the relief that we're offering in this report. I did wonder, I note that there is a further rough sleeper count planned for September, but there's also a comment that large numbers of rough sleepers have been reported in the area around the Tranby Centre and City of Perth Moore Street outside of the hours when services are provided. And I'm just wondering is this something that is an increase on what we're normally seeing, or do we not know that until
that next count is done?
Call, I'll take that question. That's correct. I mean, the count's meant to be a snapshot of time, and it's going to be repeated in September, and we'll have a much better idea in September if that has changed the actual number. My understanding is that the numbers in Vincent are fairly static. They've not changed, but definitely some of the redevelopment works around Wellington Square have had an impact on where people are actually sleeping at night. So I think that's the reason for the Tranby Centre numbers rising.
Thank you. And just a question for the management of wellbeing and built environment, or the other way around. We've the main man, and throughout all of this pandemic, we're approaching phase 5 on the 18th of July. However, we're obviously seeing some pretty worrying statistics out of Victoria, and I did see a headline today that implied the state government was reviewing that plan for phase 5, and I'm just wondering if are we getting any information about that, or is there anything we need to put in place in case things go in the other direction?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole. The main announcement that I've heard from the WA Premier is around mass gatherings, so our large venues, and that 50% rule that applies during phase 4. So within Vincent, that includes HBF Park. So that's where it will affect us here. I haven't heard any dialogue on the other main part of phase 5, which is the removal of the 2 square metre rule. So that's the area that I'm probably most interested in, that would have a very significant impact on our licensed premises, because some will be setting up to be able to increase their capacity quite markedly, considering that phase 4 only allows them to operate at around 45% capacity. So that's an announcement that we're waiting to hear from. And I also noted that the Australian Medical Association has been advocating for governments to cease unravelling of restrictions. So we'll see how that goes. But that will be, as far as I'm aware, have not heard anything about reversing the decision to remove the 2 square metre rule.
So, that would be pretty devastating for our businesses if we did have to go in the opposite direction. But would you feel confident that the support and the measures that have been put in place in the last few months would assist them in scaling back if we did have to, if restrictions were reintroduced?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole. I think it's quite important that we recognise that the level of risk of, say, COVID re-emerging in the community is not zero. There's a very real potential for that to occur. My personal view is that with the economic recovery and rebound work, that we also focus on economic resilience, which means trying to forecast the potential for these situations to occur and how we manage that from a local government perspective. Even if it doesn't happen, I think it's important to do that work. So that's my view.
Thank you very much, councillors. I just was very interested in the information provided on the homelessness update, so thank you very much for that. And it just prompted me to think around Manor Inc. and the fact that we had talked to them about coming back to us with a transitional plan. We were talking about them trialling a shift to either the Moore Street precinct or to Uniting WA's Tranby House, Tranby Centre rather. There have been some shifts around the Tranby Centre. They're having some renovations done to their kitchens, etc. And we just probably need to follow up and see where that's at with Manor Inc. And I thought also that this information about rough sleep account was very interesting, but it would be good to have the data presented to the COVID committee to show what the figures are, and also noting that Operation Heat Shield ended on the 31st of May, which was a significant uptick in police resourcing. So that's quite significant as well. I also just wanted to follow up to see whether Uniting WA have actually had a chance to get the additional outreach support on ground since that funds were dispersed from Leederville Gardens to them for that purpose.
Yes, Michael. So I take a couple of those questions. You're right. Manor Inc. were definitely meant to move to Tranby House. That was the basis on which we gave them the annual license. I think COVID has knocked everything out of balance, so we now need to go back and find out exactly if that's going to happen. And council is due an update, I think, in August on that, a formal update. So that's definitely something that's coming to council. You're right, the figures are useful, but really we're trying to map a trend where there's a trend. So we're happy to share those figures, what we've got, with council and the committee members. The final question about the additional member of staff, I don't know the answer to that. I haven't got it at my fingertips, but I'll find out. And again, I'll let council know about that.
Thank you very much, Acting CEO. Also just noted that the report towards the end talks about the fact that the strategy has been largely implemented as planned and endorsed by the committee with rapid responses to changing directives in the external environment, and that an evaluation report will be prepared for consideration at the 21st of July 2020 meeting of the committee. Is this just, I just sort of wanted to suggest that if this is a signal to wind up the committee, I'm not sure we're quite there yet, given what's happening in Melbourne and some lack of surety around even our border and the High Court challenge to that, etc. And that we still have some arts relief to work through. We still have some funding available for Leederville Gardens, etc. So is this just a sort of, is this something that will be regularly evaluated, or is this to sort of conclude the COVID subcommittee for the time being?
Through you, Mayor Cole, we've gone through a very clear transition in the last couple of months or so from what we thought would be a 6-month situation where we would have restrictions in place. And so that really lasted 3 months in effect. So my feeling is that as we're sort of moving into a different stage and focusing more on recovery and less on response, it's probably a timely situation to actually look at how we went in the first 3 months during that first stage. So it's not designed to cease the committee for now. It's designed to actually look at how we've gone and to learn from that, and just to put ourselves in good stead should we need to reintroduce some of those actions into the future.
Well, that is excellent, and I really commend that approach. It's really good to do that evaluation at this point because, as we've just been discussing, it might be something we need to travel back into. So I think that's fantastic, and I commend that approach taking place. That was all from me. Does anyone have any further questions? Okay, I'll put the item. All those in favour? Declare it carried. Second item of business is 7.2 cash in lieu funds expenditure. Could I have a mover and seconder, please? Moved Councillor Gontaszewski, seconded Councillor Castle.
Thank you. I didn't really have any major issues with this report. I just wanted to just check so that the committee is being asked to note the proposed expenditure, but essentially the final approval for the proposed expenditure will come through the approval of capital works via this year's budget process, and just confirm if that's correct. And then also just to identify that if other people or other groups, for example, town teams, have, I guess, quick wins that could be funded through this particular process, whether commentary on this current report is the way that they perhaps would have input into that, or whether it's intended to take a discussion of this through any of those roundtable discussions or because I do recall that this was discussed, this was raised as a potential outcome of, I believe, the first town team roundtable. Just wondering if they've had any further input into the consideration of these items.
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole. Thanks for asking that question. It's not in the report. We did consult with the the town teams as part of putting this package of cash in lieu projects together. We emailed all the town teams and spoke to them. They went away and worked with the group, the community group, the town centre group, to come up with ideas to highlight where issues existed. We also did the same thing through our internal systems to have a look at where we're getting complaints around parking or lack of bike parking, etc. And so that has informed this list. So basically everything that the town teams came back with sit on this list or sit in a separate list that we have that we're working on those projects, because we need some more detail before we can actually put a budget dollar item against it. So that's where the September review comes in. So there are a number of projects just as long as this list that we're still working through, because we just can't identify at this point how much it will cost to deliver those projects and how much would come out of the cash in lieu. So we're working through that, given how much time we've had. And to answer the first question, in short, yes. So the adoption of it will occur through the budget.
Okay, that's fine. And just to confirm, in relation to infrastructure and environment capacity to deliver these works and kick off within the first quarter of next financial year, if I could ask the acting CEO.
Both of us could answer that through you, Mayor Cole, if that's okay. When putting this list together, we worked very closely with the infrastructure team to ensure that only those items that could be delivered were included. So that's the basis of the project list that's been put together. Those items, again, that we're unsure of, we're still working through, and we'll discuss those as part of the budget review if there are additional things. But we can absolutely deliver these.
Okay, one more question, just in relation to, from experience, there have been times when perhaps council may have signed off on a budget allocation for a particular piece of capital works, but there hasn't been perhaps, sort of formal consultation with the residents surrounding that particular site. Just noting that there's some parking that would appear to be sort of surrounded by some residential, and obviously I know that the town teams have had discussions. So what's the way forward if should these be approved? Is it intended that there will be some notification or engagement with surrounding residents prior to confirm design or overall impact of the project on those stakeholders?
Yes, through Mayor Cole, consultation needs to occur for a lot of these projects, not for all of them. The bike parking, for instance, would speak to the immediate business that adjoins, but there's broader consultation particularly for those parking proposals. And I've discussed that with the manager of assets, and he's planning on commencing that once the budget's been adopted. So,
Thank you, Councillor Gontashevsky. Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. I have a specific question about one of the projects, the parking management in Mount Hawthorn. I'm just wondering if we could have a bit of detail about what's proposed for rationalising the parking management in car parks between Fairfield and Flinders.
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole. The detail, I don't have the detail of exactly what is being proposed to change. What the issues that have been highlighted by the town team, by the rangers, are that the parking restrictions as they exist are confusing and are causing problems. So, pardon? So changing that signage, simplifying that signage is part of the proposal, but exactly what that looks like, we still need to work through.
So is that related to recent work we've done in introducing time limits around the town centre of Mount Hawthorn? And my recollection is there was some streets that were requesting restrictions as well. I think Ellesmere, for example. Would that be considered as part of this, or that's a separate project?
Yes, through Mayor Cole. At this stage, that's a separate project. but there is potential for us to look at that at the same time. It's certainly been on the cards for a while. So it's worthwhile looking at it all together. If we're going to buy signs, new signs, we might as well buy them all in one hit.
And just a broader question around these projects. So I understand this is the first tranche, and at the September review, there will be more projects for consideration. Is the goal for those projects to broadly align with where that money has been collected from? And so is that part of the consideration for the September list, to make sure we have covered off areas that perhaps had more projects completed in the first tranche? Because there does seem to be a lot in the North Perth, Mount Hawthorn area, and a lot of money is collected in the Perth Highgate area. So will that's something that will be addressed when we review in September?
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole. So the expenditure will be tied to the revenue or the cash in lieu that's been paid, the exact location. So each time we spend money, we will remove that cash in lieu contribution from the data that you can see in attachment 1. We have not focused on particular areas. What we've done is we've tried to find those projects that can be implemented quickly, where either where there's an urgent issue that needs to be addressed, or there's a project that's already progressed to a point that we can actually implement it right now. The same thing will happen in September. We won't be at a point where we can address the strategic long-term issues in those specific locations where cash and lieu has been contributed from, until later on at the end of the financial year, I would say, once we have the ITP, the Integrated Transport Plan, which has now changed, accessible city strategy, in place. And then, so I would say towards the end of this financial year, we'll be in a position where we can start planning those projects and delivering those.
And I'm sorry I haven't added it up, but what does these projects amount to in cost, roughly?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'd have to add it up myself as well, to be honest.
I guess the purpose of my question is we've got close to 2 million in that reserve. Would I be right in assuming we're not aiming to expend the bulk of that in these two processes? And is this really the beginning of a process that could happen on a regular basis?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole, that's correct. We're not proposing to expend the majority of the funds here. It's less than 350,000 from the calculation I've just done. So it's significant, but it's not, it's certainly nowhere near the majority of the 2 million roughly we have in cash in the reserve.
Okay, so I assume that at some point, as you're saying, maybe towards the end of this financial year, we've got time to look at some of those broader strategies that would have higher cost and perhaps have a benefit to the whole city, that are more sort of structural projects to address longer term issues.
That's correct, yes.
Thank you, Councillor Castle. Look, I'm just really pleased to see us using our reserve funds, and I think it's great that we've been able to pull together this package for the first quarter. I think it'd be really interesting to consider maybe some larger scale infrastructure projects. There's quite significant funds here. We could look at, say, pedestrian crossing. Depending on roads and services, they can be achieved from as little as 250, which is a significant sum of money, but a real benefit. So I think that this is a really great sort of selection of projects, and I'm really pleased that we've been able to get on top of these quickly, and thank the team for pulling this together. But I wouldn't shy away from considering maybe some more major consolidation of this funding to look at things like pedestrian crossings or things that are of a higher order, because I know that we have been trying to keep track of a list of where we think pedestrian crossing is difficult, and that would be something really substantial and impactful to consider potentially. And I do note that our local member is doing a pedestrian safety survey at the moment across the community, and could actually be a really good source of information that I'm sure he'd be happy to share with us, and potentially even co-fund things, and we could potentially use some of this funding for. So great work, thank you, and can't wait to see this in the budget. Any further questions? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? Declare it carried. That concludes the business arising for this meeting. So item 8, announcements by presiding member. You're in luck. I'm not going to go there today. General business, item 9. Any general business to raise? No, okay. Confidential items, we have nil. Next meeting, item 11, we are moving to our fortnightly structure from here. So the next meeting is on the 21st of July 2020. I did just have a quick question about whether we might see, we had a couple of arts relief applicants that we were seeking additional information on. Do you think that at this stage, if they are meeting those public art elements, that they may come back to this meeting?
Through you, Mayor Cole, we're still going through the evaluation process and getting more information. But I would say probably the next meeting is when we'd be able to definitively close that out. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, Director. All right, so there being nothing further, I declare the meeting closed and the time is 1:28 p.m. Thank you.